Zelisha Perrin hated the sound of the alarm clock at 4 o'clock in the morning, yet it was the one that jolted her out of her sleep on that July morning when the phone rang with a piercing trill. The Austin police homicide detective reached for her bedside table, fumbling for the source of the sound. Through her half-dream, she heard the voice of a dispatcher reporting a homicide on the east side of town. 27 Magnolia Street, the voice on the other end of the line said. Female, approximately 35 to 40 years old, multiple gunshot wounds, body discovered by a neighbor about half an hour ago. Zelisha nodded, though the dispatcher couldn't see it, and mumbled that she was on her way. 20 minutes later, she was already driving her tattered sedan through the deserted streets of Austin. The morning air was warm and humid, heralding another sweltering Texas day. Magnolia Street was a typical working-class neighborhood street. Small one-story houses, many in need of repair, overgrown lawns, and old cars parked in driveways. Number 27 didn't stand out, except for the police cars with blinkers that surrounded it. Zelisha parked behind the police van and, showing her badge to the patrolman, crossed the yellow tape enclosing the crime scene. Standing on the front porch was a woman in her 40s, wrapped in an old robe, with an expression of shock on her face. Next to her, a young patrol officer was writing something down in a notebook. Detective Perrin, homicide, Zelisha introduced herself as she approached the woman. Did you find the body? The woman nodded, her hands shaking visibly as she adjusted the collar of her robe. Gina Lockwood, she said hoarsely. I live across the street. Doreen and I... She hesitated. Doreen and I were friends. Zelisha nodded, making a mental note. She always started by establishing the victim's relationship with those around her. What made you come here at this early hour, Mrs. Lockwood? Gina swallowed nervously. Doreen promised to give me a ride to work. I work in the cafeteria at the hospital, starting at 5:30. We agreed that she would pick me up at 4:45. When she didn't show up and didn't answer her cell phone, I decided to stop by. I have a spare key. Gina's voice trembled and she fell silent, obviously remembering what she had seen. Did you notice anything unusual when you came in? Zelisha asked softly. Other than the obvious. The front door was unlocked, Gina answered after a pause. That wasn't like her. Doreen always locked the doors at night. And also, she looked over the detective's shoulder. The house was tidy. Doreen was never much of a keeper, but last night she seemed to have cleaned it all out. Zelisha nodded, and telling Gina she'd be back for a more detailed debriefing, headed inside the house. The interior was modest, but really tidy. A small living room with a worn couch and an old TV transitioned into a small kitchen. Through an open door on the right, Zelisha saw the bedroom where the forensics team was already working. Doreen Ziras's body lay on the bed, dressed in a nightgown. The first thing that caught Zelisha's eye was the dark bloodstains on the light-colored bedding, 3 gunshot wounds to the chest. Judging by the lack of signs of struggle and the posture of the body, the woman was most likely asleep when she was shot. Time of death? Zelisha asked the medical examiner, an older man leaning over the body. Preliminary between midnight and 2 a.m., he replied without looking up. 3 shots fired at close range, probably .38 caliber. Zelisha looked around the room. The drawers of the dresser had been pulled out, their contents partially discarded on the floor. On the bedside table was an open wallet from which cash had been removed. Looks like a robbery, remarked a young officer standing in the bedroom doorway. Zelisha shook her head. Too neat for a common burglar. Look, she pointed to the dresser. Only some of the drawers are open and things aren't scattered randomly. Someone was looking for something specific or wanted to make it look like a robbery. The detective returned to the living room, where a framed photograph on the wall caught her attention. It showed Doreen next to a tall man by a large truck. Is that the husband? Zelisha asked an officer studying the call log on the victim's cell phone. Yes, Raymond Zeras, the man answered. Long-haul trucker. Neighbor said he was supposed to be on a road trip. We're trying to get a hold of him. Who's that? Zelisha pointed to another photograph where a young boy of 17 stood next to the couple. The husband's nephew, Hugo Gilenio, the officer replied. Lives a couple blocks from here with his mother, Raymond's sister. He's often here, helping out around the house when his uncle's away. Zilisha nodded thoughtfully and continued her tour of the house. The kitchen was in perfect order, not a single dirty plate, the floor freshly scrubbed. There were empty takeout containers, 2 wine glasses, and dried flowers in the trash can. The detective opened the refrigerator, half empty, but with a bottle of champagne and leftover cake. "Looks like someone had a party," she muttered to herself. Zilisha turned back to Gina Lockwood, who was now sitting in the police car, wrapped in the blanket she'd been offered, despite the warm weather. "Mrs. Lockwood, do you know if Doreen had some sort of celebration yesterday? A birthday? An anniversary?" Gina shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Doreen's birthday is in September and her and Raymond's wedding anniversary is in March. And the cake and champagne in the fridge?" Gina frowned. "I don't know. Maybe it's just the way it is. Doreen had been buying herself all sorts of goodies lately. Said she deserved a little joy." "When was the last time you saw her?" "Yesterday afternoon, around 3 o'clock. She came by to borrow my mixer. Said she wanted to bake something." "Was she alone?" Gina took a while to answer. "Yeah, she was alone when she came to see me, but I saw Hugo go over to their house around 6 o'clock at night. He comes over a lot when Raymond's away. He helps around the house, fixes things." "Is Raymond on a trip right now?" "He should be. He left 3 days ago, said he wouldn't be back till Friday." Zilika made a note in her notebook. "How would you describe the relationship between Doreen and Raymond?" Gina shrugged her shoulders. "Like everyone else's, I guess. There have been fights, but nothing serious. Raymond works a lot, often away. Doreen sometimes complained of loneliness. And Doreen's relationship with Hugo? Good, as far as I can tell. He's a good boy, polite. Doreen always said he was like the son they never had." Zilisha nodded gratefully and stepped back as one of the CSIs called out to her. He showed a small silver object found under the bed. "A cufflink," he said. "Unusual for this house." The detective picked up the cufflink, examining the intricate pattern. It wasn't a cheap piece of jewelry. It was strange to find one in a house of modest means. By 7 o'clock in the morning, Zilisha had gotten Hugo Gelenio's phone number from his mother and arranged a meeting. The boy was to arrive at the Zaras' house at 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, Raymond Zaras still couldn't be found. His phone was out of range, and the transportation company said he really should be on a flight to New Mexico. At exactly 8 o'clock, Hugo Gelenio showed up at the yellow police tape. A tall, skinny guy in jeans and a t-shirt with the logo of the local basketball team looked nervous and scared. "Miss Perron?" he asked uncertainly when he saw the detective. "Mom said you wanted to talk to me about Aunt Doreen." Zilisha led him to her car, away from the house and the prying eyes of the neighbors who were already starting to gather. "Hugo, when was the last time you saw your aunt?" she asked, watching the boy's reaction. He was visibly tense, his eyes darting toward the house. "Yesterday, last night. I stopped by to help her with the kitchen sink. It was leaking." "What time was that?" Around 6 o'clock. I was there for maybe an hour. Then I went home." "And never came back?" Hugo shook his head too quickly, it seemed to Zilik. "No, I was home all evening. My mom can confirm it." "Your mom was home last night?" "Yeah, no. She was working the night shift. But I didn't go out, I swear. I was playing online games till late." "With anyone in particular? Who can confirm that you were online?" Hugo swallowed nervously. "With friends from school. I can give you their contacts." Zilisha nodded, making a note. "Raymond's on a flight right now, right?" "Yes, he left on Monday. Should be back on Friday." "Do you often help your aunt when your uncle is away?" "Yes, Uncle Raymond always asks me to look after the house. I fixed their fence last week and helped with the computer." "How would you describe the relationship between your uncle and aunt?" Hugo hesitated, his fingers nervously rubbing the edge of his t-shirt. "Normal, I guess, like everyone else's." "Did they fight a lot?" "Sometimes. Mostly over money or because Uncle Raymond wasn't home much." "And your relationship with your aunt?" Hugo turned noticeably pale. "It's good. She's always been good to me. Helped me with my homework when I was younger. Cooked my favorite food when I came over." Zilisha watched the boy carefully. Something about his demeanor seemed unnatural, too tense. She pulled a bag of cufflinks from her pocket. "Are these yours?" Hugo stared at the silver cufflink, and his face turned ashy. "No," he said, stammering. "I don't wear things like that." "That's odd," Zelisha said thoughtfully. "We found it in Doreen's bedroom. Do you know who it might belong to?" "I have no idea," Hugo answered too quickly. "Maybe to Uncle Raymond?" "Maybe," Zelisha agreed, though she doubted that a trucker would wear such exquisite accessories. "Have you noticed anything unusual in your aunt's behavior lately?" Hugo shook his head, avoiding a direct look. "No, nothing like that. She was ordinary." "Gina Lockwood says your aunt had cake and champagne in the fridge. Do you know what the occasion was?" "No," Hugo answered too sharply. "Maybe she just wanted to treat herself." Zilica decided to change tactics. "Hugo, do you know that withholding information from the police during a murder investigation is a serious offense?" The boy flinched, his eyes widening with fear. "I'm not hiding anything," he almost shouted. I don't know what happened. I was home all night, I swear." At that moment, an officer came up to them and informed them that the transportation company had been able to contact Raymond Zaras. He was on his way and promised to return to Austin immediately as soon as he heard the news. Zelisha let Hugo go, taking Hugo's promise to remain available for further questions. As she watched the boy hurriedly leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. Back at the house, the detective noticed a security camera on a neighboring building. She went to the owner, an elderly man, who confirmed that the camera was working and captured part of the street, including the driveway of the Zaras' house. By noon, Zelisha had gathered all the preliminary data and returned to the station. Analyzing the information she had gathered, she couldn't help but notice a few inconsistencies. If Doreen was preparing for some kind of celebration, why didn't anyone know about it? Why was Hugo so nervous when asked about the cufflink? And why, if Raymond was on a voyage, was the house so thoroughly cleaned as if his return was expected? The detective decided to check the GPS data of Raymond's truck through the transportation company. She also requested the neighbor's surveillance footage and called Hugo's friends to check his alibi. The first results started coming in by late afternoon. The camera footage showed that Hugo had indeed arrived at Doreen's house around 6 p.m. and left about 2 hours later, not 1 as he claimed. Moreover, the camera recorded him returning around 10 p.m. and remaining there until midnight. Hugo's friends confirmed that they played with him online, but only until 10 o'clock in the evening, not all night as the guy claimed. Zelisha was sitting at her desk, poring over notes, when she got a call from the transportation company. The GPS data from Raymond Zaras' truck showed that the vehicle had made an unscheduled turn around 8 o'clock last night and headed toward Austin rather than continuing on its route. Zelisha Perron spent the rest of the day going through documents and forensic reports. She spread the crime scene photos out on her desk, trying to catch what she might have missed. Doreen Zaras had been shot in her sleep with 3 shots to the chest. No sign of forced entry or struggle. A mock robbery seemed unconvincing even to a rookie. The next morning, Zelisha decided to talk to Gina Lockwood again. She found the woman in a small apartment above the auto repair shop across from the Zaras' house. Unlike yesterday, Gina looked more collected, although her red eyes betrayed a sleepless night. "Mrs. Lockwood," Zelisha began, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of the proffered coffee. "Tell me more about Doreen. What kind of woman was she like?" Gina sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Doreen was complicated, in public, always smiling, friendly. But in recent years, I've seen her change. She's become quieter, more withdrawn." "Why do you think that is?" "Marriage," Gina shrugged. "When she and Raymond were married 15 years ago, they were like lovebirds. But the years have gone by. Raymond is always traveling. She's always alone. They have no children. You know, that kind of life can break a woman." Zelisha nodded, making notes. "And in recent months, have you noticed any changes in her behavior?" Gina hesitated, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "Yes, I suppose so. She's become, I don't know how to put it, more animated. Started taking better care of herself. She bought new clothes, got her hair done. I even made a joke about whether she was in love. She laughed and said she just decided not to let life pass her by." "Did she mention any problems with Raymond?" "Not directly, but one day, about 2 months ago, she came to me in tears. Said Raymond accused her of spending too much money. They had a big row. He even took away her credit card. Zelisha frowned. Was he in control of her finances? Lately, yes. Said they were saving for a better house and every dollar counted. But you know what's weird? Gina lowered her voice even though they were alone. 2 weeks ago, I saw Doreen buying expensive perfume at the mall. When I asked where the money came from, she smiled enigmatically and said she had her source. The detective made another note. A secret source of income, or did someone give her gifts? What can you tell me about Hugo? Did he visit Doreen often? Gina nodded. Especially in the last few months. Raymond always asked him to look after the house and Doreen when he went away. Good boy, polite, helped her with her housework, her computer. You know how tech-savvy these young men are. Did you ever notice anything, unusual in the way they interacted? Gina froze for a moment, then slowly raised her gaze to Zelisha. What do you mean? Anything that struck you as odd, tension, getting too close, secret conversations. The woman looked away, clearly hesitating. There was one occasion about a month ago. I stopped by Doreen's unannounced, brought her a prescription she'd asked for. Hugo was there. When I walked in, they quickly bounced off each other. It was like, I don't know, like I'd caught them doing something. Doreen was all red, and Hugo just ran out of the room. At the time, I thought maybe they were talking about some kind of surprise for Raymond. But now, she shook her head. I don't know what to think. Zelisha thanked Gina for the information and went to the police station. There, she checked the forensic results of Doreen's phone. The technical department was able to recover some of the deleted messages. Most of them had been sent to a number registered to Hugo Gelenio. I can't wait for our meeting. R is leaving on Monday. Bought that special wine you liked last time. Love you more than you can imagine. Miss you every minute. Zelisha leaned back in her chair, digesting the information. A picture was beginning to take shape, and it wasn't a pretty one. A 38-year-old woman and her husband's 17-year-old nephew. She imagined how Raymond must have felt if he'd found out. At that moment, a young officer entered the office. Detective Perron, Raymond Zairis was here to testify. Zelisha found Raymond in the interrogation room, a large man with a hard stare and tense shoulders. He looked exhausted, with eyes red from sleep and stubble on his face. Mr. Zairis, Zelisha began, sitting down across from him. I'm sorry for your loss. Raymond nodded, his large hands clenched into fists on the table. What happened? He asked in a hoarse voice. Who did this to my Doreen? We're working on it, Zelisha replied. I need to ask you some questions. You were on the flight at the time of the murder, right? Yes, Raymond nodded. I left Monday morning, wasn't due back until Friday. But your truck's GPS shows that you turned off your route last night and headed toward Austin. Raymond frowned. What? No, there must be some mistake. I was on the highway all night, only stopping at a gas station in El Paso around 3 in the morning. Do you have proof, receipts, gas station video? There's got to be security footage. I paid with a company card. Zelisha made a note to follow up on that information. How was your relationship with your wife recently, Mr. Zairis? Raymond sighed, his shoulders slumped. Fine, I think. There have been problems, of course. I'm always on the road, she's always alone. Sometimes we fought about money. Doreen liked nice things and I was trying to save for a new house. Did you control her spending? Not controlled, but monitored. Raymond frowned. We agreed on it together. Every dollar counts. Nevertheless, your wife had been buying expensive things lately. Where did she get the money from? Raymond looked genuinely surprised. What? What things? Perfume, clothes, wine, Zelisha listed. Your neighbor, Gina Lockwood, had mentioned it. Raymond's face darkened. I don't know anything about that. Maybe she was saving from her grocery money. Or... He fell silent, clenching his jaw. Or what, Mr. Zairis? Or someone else was buying her those things. He gritted his teeth. Zelisha watched his reaction carefully. Do you have any suspicions as to who it might be? Raymond shook his head. No, Doreen isn't like that. She wouldn't... He fell silent again, unable to pronounce the word cheated. Did your nephew Hugo often come to your house when you were away? Yes, I asked him to look after the house and Doreen myself. He's a good guy, helped with repairs, appliances. How would you describe the relationship between Hugo and your wife? Raymond shrugged his shoulders. Normal. Doreen always wanted kids, but it didn't work out. I think she saw Hugo as the son we never had. Zilica decided not to show the restored messages yet. She wanted to talk to Hugo again first. Mr. Zaris, do you have any cufflinks with a silver pattern? Raymond raised his eyebrows in surprise. Cufflinks? No, of course not. I'm a trucker, not a banker. Why would I need cufflinks? What about Hugo's? I don't think so. He's a regular teenager, wears t-shirts and jeans. Zalicia nodded, making a mental note. Mr. Zaris, do you have a home security system? Surveillance cameras? Raymond hesitated to answer. No, not outside, but... He sighed. I installed a small camera in the living room a few months ago. Why? Money was going missing, Raymond admitted reluctantly. Small amounts from a stash I kept in a book on the shelf. At first, I thought I'd spent it myself and forgotten. Then I decided to check it out. And what did the camera show? Nothing. I mean, I didn't see Doreen take the money, but I'd already moved my stash by then, so... He shrugged. Where is this camera? In the clock on the mantelpiece. It reacts to movement and records on a memory card. Zalicia felt a chill run down her spine. If this camera was running the night of the murder... After questioning Raymond, the detective sent officers to the Zara's house to look for the hidden camera. She tried to contact Hugo, but his cell phone was disconnected. A visit to the residence also yielded no results. Hugo's mother reported that he left early in the morning and did not say where he was going. Meanwhile, the tech department confirmed that the GPS data from Raymond's truck did show movement toward Austin on the evening of the murder. But then the signal disappeared for several hours. When it reappeared, the truck was on its way to El Paso. By mid-afternoon, officers found the camera in the Zara's home. It was artfully hidden in a decorative clock on the mantelpiece, just as Raymond had described. The memory card was removed and sent to the lab for analysis. Zalicia decided to talk to Gina Lockwood again, hoping to get more information about Doreen and Hugo's interaction. Mrs. Lockwood, she began as they sat at the kitchen table again. You mentioned a strange incident when you caught Hugo and Doreen together. Were there other moments that struck you as unusual? Gina hesitated, nervously twirling her teacup in her hands. Now that you ask, a couple of times I saw them sitting in Doreen's car in front of the house, just sitting and talking, sometimes for hours. Once I saw him holding her hand. Then I thought maybe she was upset about something and he was comforting her. But now... Anything else? Doreen started mentioning Hugo a lot in conversation. How smart he was, how talented. She once said that if she'd met someone like him when she was younger, her life would have been different. I laughed at the time, but Gina shook her head. God, did they really? Zalicia neither confirmed nor denied Gina's suspicions, but asked to be informed if Hugo showed up in the neighborhood. Back at the station, the detective found that the tech department had already retrieved the video footage from the memory card. The camera had indeed been running on the night of the murder, but the footage didn't start until 2 a.m., well after the estimated time of Doreen's death. However, there were other files on the card, recordings from the previous days and weeks. Zalicia began to look through them, starting with the most recent ones. A recording from the evening before the murder showed Doreen and Hugo in the living room. They were sitting on the couch, holding hands. Hugo was saying something, and Doreen was looking at him with an expression that could only be described as love. At one point they kissed, not an innocent kiss between aunt and nephew, but a passionate kiss between lovers. Zalicia continued to look through the tapes, discovering more and more evidence of their relationship. Some showed Doreen and Hugo just talking or watching movies. Others showed them hugging and kissing. One tape from 2 weeks ago showed them dancing in the living room to soft music, pressed up against each other. Looking at these tapes, Zalicia realized she had discovered a motive. If Raymond had seen those tapes, if he knew about the relationship between his wife and his underage nephew. Her musings were interrupted by the ringing of the telephone. It was the officer sent to find Hugo. Detective Perrin, we found him, he reported. Hugo Gelenio was trying to buy a bus ticket to Dallas. We have him in custody and are taking him to the station. Zalicia nodded, feeling the last piece of the puzzle coming together. One more thing, the officer added. He had a bag of clothes and about $2,000 in cash. Thank you, Zelisha replied. "I'll be waiting at the station." She hung up the phone and went back to looking at her notes. Suddenly, her attention was drawn to a file dated 3 days earlier, the day Raymond had left on his trip. The footage showed Raymond standing in front of the camera, checking its operation. He then stepped back and pulled a small black object from a cabinet, which the detective was horrified to identify as a gun. Raymond checked the magazine, stowed the gun in his bag, and walked out of the frame. Zelisha quickly contacted the tech department and requested an analysis of all the video files from the last 2 weeks. If Raymond knew about his wife and nephew's relationship, if he'd brought a gun with him and then turned off the route the night of the murder. The detective glanced at her watch. Hugo was due at the station within half an hour. Perhaps now he would be more forthcoming. In the meantime, Zelisha decided to take another look at the neighbor's surveillance footage covering the day of the murder. The footage clearly shows Hugo arriving at Doreen's house in the evening and leaving around midnight. No sign of any other visitor was recorded by the camera. However, Zelisha noticed that only the front of the house was in the camera's field of view. If someone approached from the backyard, she went back to the plan of the Zairas' house. Behind the house was a small alley leading to the garages of the neighboring houses. Someone familiar with the neighborhood could have approached unnoticed from that side. Zelisha pulled out the crime scene photos and scrutinized them again. 3 shots to the chest at close range. No sign of a struggle. Doreen was probably asleep when she was killed, or she knew her killer. And wasn't afraid of him. Techs reported that the gun found in the house had Raymond's prints on it, which wouldn't be surprising if it was his weapon. But they also found microscopic traces of gunpowder on Raymond's clothing, which he turned in when he was arrested. He claimed he hadn't touched the weapon in months. Zelisha looked at her watch. Hugo was due to be brought in any minute. Perhaps his testimony would shed light on the last hours of Doreen Zairas' life. Hugo Gelenio sat in the interrogation room, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. He was pale, dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep. When Zelisha entered, the boy flinched as if he'd been electrocuted. "Going somewhere, Hugo?" Zelisha asked, sitting down across from him and spreading out a folder of papers. "Yeah, I just wanted to get away for a few days," he mumbled. "Couldn't stay here after what happened to Aunt Doreen." "With $2,000 in cash?" Hugo lowered his head, avoiding the detective's gaze. "That's my money. I've been saving it." Zelisha opened the folder and pulled out some still images from the videotape. "Hugo, I saw the footage from the camera your uncle installed in the living room." The blood drained from the boy's face. What camera?" "The one that recorded you and Doreen together, many times." She spread the photos in front of Hugo, the ones of him hugging and kissing Doreen. The boy stared at them, his lips quivering. "You lied to me about your relationship with Doreen," Zelisha continued. "You lied about how much time you spent in her house the night of the murder. You tried to flee town with a large sum of cash. You know what that looks like?" "I didn't kill her!" Hugo exclaimed, raising his eyes full of tears. "I swear I didn't do it." "Then tell me the truth. Everything from the beginning." Hugo took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "It started about 6 months ago," he began quietly. "I was helping Aunt Doreen with her computer. We got to talking. She was so sad. She told me how lonely she was with Uncle Raymond, how he was never home, how he controlled her every move. We started spending more time together. At first we just talked. Then he stopped talking, clearly embarrassed. Then your relationship became romantic." Zelisha finished for him. Hugo nodded, wiping his tears with his sleeve. "I know it's wrong. She was my uncle's wife. She's older. But I fell in love with her. And she fell in love with me, too. She said she'd never felt so alive, so happy." "Did Raymond know this?" "No!" Hugo exclaimed fearfully. "At least we thought he did. We were always careful. Never went out in public together. Uncle Raymond was away most of the time." "What happened the night of the murder, Hugo?" Zelisha asked, watching his reaction carefully. The boy swallowed, his gaze distant, as if he were reliving the events of that night. "I went over to her place around 6 in the evening. We had dinner, watched a movie. Then," he stammered again, blushing. Then we were together. I left around midnight. She was alive and well when I left, I swear. Why didn't you say so before?" "I was afraid," Hugo exclaimed. "I was afraid you'd think I'd killed her. I'm ashamed. I know that what we had was wrong. But I loved her." His voice trailed off. "I did love her." Zelisha stared at the sobbing teenager, trying to determine if he was telling the truth. His emotions seemed genuine, but that didn't prove anything yet. "Did you have plans for the future?" Hugo nodded, wiping away his tears. "We wanted to leave together. Away from here, start a new life. She was saving money. The 2,000 you found on me was her money. She gave it to me the day before it happened. Said she'd have more in a week so we could leave." "Where did she get the money from, Hugo?" "She took a little from Uncle Raymond's stash. She said it was only fair, because she'd been running his house for years, and he wouldn't even give her money for herself." Zelisha made a note of it. So it wasn't for nothing that Raymond suspected money was going missing. "Did you know about the camera in the living room?" Hugo shook his head. "No. Doreen didn't know either. We would never have done anything like that if we'd known Uncle Raymond could see." After the interrogation, Hugo Zelisha turned to new information from the tech department. An analysis of Raymond's camera footage showed that he had indeed viewed it remotely the day before the murder. A special app on his phone allowed him to see what was going on in his house when he was away. What's more, one of the recordings showed Raymond coming home around 1 a.m., the very night Doreen was killed. The recording was short. Raymond apparently noticed the camera right away and turned it off, but it was enough to place him at the scene at the time of the murder. Zelisha assembled a search party to comb the neighborhood of the Zaira's home for the murder weapon. Special attention was paid to an abandoned house across several lots, whose garage faced the same alley as the Zaira's house. Their efforts were rewarded. In a dumpster next to the abandoned garage, they found a .38 caliber handgun wrapped in a rag. Preliminary analysis showed that the weapon matched the type used to kill Doreen. There were partial prints on the grip that could have belonged to Raymond. Armed with the new evidence, Zelisha returned to Raymond Zairas, who was still at the station. He was sitting in the interrogation room, outwardly calm, but his fingers were tapping incessantly on the table, a sign of inner tension that did not escape the detective's attention. "Mr. Zairas," Zelisha began, sitting down opposite him, "we found the gun that killed your wife." Raymond looked up at her, but said nothing. "It was hidden in a trash can next to an abandoned garage 3 houses down from yours. Partial prints were found on it, which, according to preliminary data, match yours." "That's impossible," Raymond said hoarsely. "I didn't touch any weapon." "And this is interesting," Zelisha continued, pulling out a printout of a still image from the video. "Because this is where you check the gun before you leave for your flight. The same gun we found in the dumpster." Raymond stared at the photo, his face impassive. "I always take a gun on the road, for safety. A lot of truckers do." "Sure," Zelisha nodded. "But why would you want to come home in the middle of a trip?" "I didn't." "The camera in your living room captured you, Mr. Zairas, at 1 a.m., the night of the murder." Raymond was silent, his gaze distant. "We also discovered that you regularly viewed the camera footage remotely," Zelisha continued, "including a tape from the day before the murder, in which your wife and your nephew—" "Enough!" Raymond interrupted her sharply, slamming his fist on the table. "I don't want to hear it." "You saw them together," Zelisha said softly. "You saw them betray you, your wife and your 17-year-old nephew. I can imagine how you felt." Raymond covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. "You don't understand," he said softly. "I loved her. I worked my ass off to give her a better life, and she, with him. So you decided to come home early," Zelisha continued. "You veered off the route, turned off the GPS, arrived home around 1 o'clock in the morning." Raymond didn't deny it, just sat with his head down. "What happened then, Raymond?" Zelisha asked softly. "You came home and what?" "I wanted to talk to her," he finally said in a trembling voice. "I swear I just wanted to talk. Ask her why she did that to me. But she was asleep when you came in." Raymond nodded, his eyes full of tears. "She was lying there, so peaceful, so beautiful. And I remembered how she was with him, how she'd smiled at him like she'd never smiled at me, how she kissed him like he was everything to her. and me. I was just a wallet. A man who worked so she could live in comfort while she had fun with the boy. And you pulled out a gun, Zilisha said quietly. I don't remember. Raymond shook his head. I only remember looking at her and the pain and rage burning inside me. And then she opened her eyes and saw me. And she wasn't scared, you know? She just looked at me with this look of, disappointed. Like I was a nuisance in her beautiful new life. He fell silent, breathing deeply, trying to hold back his sobs. What did she say, Raymond? Zilisha asked insistently. She said, Then you know, he answered after a pause. No fear, no remorse, just a statement of fact. And then she said she was going to leave me, that she and Hugo loved each other, and they would be better off without me. His hands clenched into fists, knuckles white with tension. 15 years, he whispered. 15 years I loved her, took care of her, and she was going to leave me for a boy who doesn't even know what real life is. And then you shot her, Zilisha finished. Raymond looked up at her, his eyes full of pain. I didn't mean it, he whispered. I didn't plan to kill her. It just happened. I saw the gun in my hand, heard the shots. She didn't even scream. She just looked at me in surprise, as if she couldn't believe I was capable of it. Zilisha listened in silence, giving him a chance to talk. Then I realized what I'd done, Raymond continued. I panicked. I tried to make it look like a robbery. Opened the drawers, emptied the stuff out, took the money out of her purse, dumped the gun on the way back to the highway. I thought, I hope no one would find out. And Hugo? Zilisha asked. Were you planning to do something to him? Raymond shook his head. No, he's just a boy, confused, seduced by a grown woman. I was angry with him, but he's my blood. I couldn't hurt him. Zilisha took out a notebook and a pen. Mr. Ziris, I want you to describe in detail everything that happened that night. From the very beginning. Raymond nodded, resigned to his fate. I installed the camera about 3 months ago, he began. At first because of the missing money. But then I started to notice other things. Doreen became distant, always busy when I called. Hugo was at our house more and more. I began to suspect something was going on. He took a deep breath, gathering his strength to continue. I was on the road that day, about 4 hours from Austin. Checked my camera, as I did regularly, and I saw them together. They weren't just kissing. They were, He stammered, unable to say it out loud. They were together as husband and wife, in our house, in our living room. Raymond clenched his hands into fists, remembering that moment. It was like I'd lost my mind. Turned off the highway, turned off the GPS tracker, drove like a madman. Got home around 1 a.m., came in the back door. Doreen was asleep. I woke her up. We talked. Or rather, I yelled. And she answered as calmly as if she was discussing the weather, not the collapse of our marriage. He told me how he'd pulled out a gun, how Doreen hadn't been scared even then, certain he wasn't capable of violence. How something inside him broke when she told him Hugo was giving her the happiness he could never give her. I fired 3 shots, Raymond finished quietly. Then I tried to stage a robbery and drove away. Got back on the highway, turned on the GPS again. Stopped at a gas station in El Paso, just like I'd planned. In the morning, I got a call that my wife was dead. Zilisha finished writing up her statement and handed the paper to Raymond for his signature. I'm sorry for what happened, Mr. Ziris, she said sincerely. But you will have to answer for your actions. Raymond nodded, signing the confession. I know, he said tiredly. I've already been punished more than any court could ever punish me. I have lost everything I loved. Zilisha left the interrogation room, leaving Raymond with the officer who was to read him his rights and make the arrest. In the hallway, she saw Hugo sitting on a bench with a lost look. The boy looked up at her with eyes full of tears. It's Uncle Raymond, isn't it? He asked quietly. Did he kill her? Zilisha nodded, seeing no point in hiding the truth. He saw you two together on the camera footage. Came home and confronted Doreen. She told him she was going to leave with you. Hugo covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. It's my fault, he whispered. If we hadn't. Listen to me, Zilisha said firmly, sitting down beside him. What happened between you and Doreen is a separate story. What Raymond did was his choice and his responsibility. No one deserves to be killed, even if they made a mistake. She was silent, giving the boy time to realize her words. "What happens now?" Hugo finally asked. "Raymond will stand trial. Given his confession and the circumstances, he'll probably get 15 years to life. You're gonna have to testify. It's not going to be easy." Hugo nodded, wiping away tears. "I understand. I'll tell the truth. The whole truth." Zelisha left him with the social worker and returned to her office. As she filled out the report, she thought about the tragedy that had played out in the Zaira's family, the love that had turned to obsession and jealousy, about the secret relationships that had ruined 3 lives, the choices people make when they're backed into a corner. At 1 o'clock in the morning, having completed the formalities, Zelisha Perrin left the station. The case was closed. The killer had confessed. Justice would be served. But the bitter taste of the story, she knew, would stay with her for a long time.